I want to bring in Clint Watts, former FBI special agent, MSNBC national security analyst as well, to talk more about this. So we're just getting this statement in from the IDF, and there was this assumption, especially from the reporting that we've been seeing on the ground with the lineup of tanks along the Israeli-Gaza border, that they were preparing for this ground invasion, and now getting this statement once again, which I'll read for folks, Clint, and then have you react and your expectations here. IDF forces, backed by an extensive logistical effort and by completing the reserve mobilization of hundreds of thousands of servicemen, are preparing to implement a wide range of offensive operative plans, which include, among other things, an integrated and coordinated attack from the air, sea, and land. What are your expectations from what you're hearing here and what we've been seeing, of course, on the ground, as well as to when this ground incursion would begin?
Yeah, I think a lot of these statements are, multifaceted. One, they're saying that they're ready, but two, they're also putting pressure on the international community in many ways. The humanitarian situation in the South is going to be dire. Water, electric, food, all of these things have been cut off. The Gaza Strip is under siege at this point, and they're going to need help from outside at a certain point. We're still looking at evacuating Americans through the Rafah Gate. There was some confusion, I think, today, and the U.S. has said to stand by. Egypt has been, I would say, somewhat quiet about what they're going to do, and at the same point, the Israelis don't want to get caught off guard possibly by Hamas in the north, Hezbollah in the north. They want to focus their energy on Hamas around Gaza. So the longer they wait, the more they hesitate, the more time Hezbollah could be a spoiler in some ways, drawing forces back to the north. So they don't have much time, and I imagine at this point they're already well into their reconnaissance inside Gaza, preparing for where they're going to go, trying to identify where their initial footholds will be, how they will go about doing their breach operations, but they're also probably still trying to rescue hostages if they can get any intelligence that's actionable. I'm sure they're already moving to get to that point right now.
So you mentioned a lot of really important things there that I want to dig in on. So you talk first about any intelligence that is actionable. And I think much of the intelligence that is being gathered right now is somewhat being questioned, not just internally in Israel because of what took place last Saturday, but globally as well, considering it seemed as if, especially with this CIA report that was just released, that there was some activity possibly happening, not to this extent. But there did seem to be some activity happening in the days leading up to the attack on Saturday. We know Mossad has a very intense surveillance on Gaza, and yet they miss this. So how reliant can they be before this ground invasion on the intelligence they're getting, on human intelligence they're getting from inside Gaza, to avoid both killing Israeli hostages along with killing innocent civilians, innocent Palestinian civilians?
Yeah, I would imagine at this point, human intelligence, they probably relied on it very heavily just the last few days to try and identify where hostages are at. But now you're talking about a situation with 1 million people moving down to the south. It's going to be very difficult, I would imagine, for the Israelis to keep any remaining human intelligence assets in place. And the second part is they're also going through communication blackouts. Remember, cell towers, cell signals, all communication channels, when the power goes out, those things start to dwindle. And so you have less and less ability to do that. What I would say is I'm sure their air-ground technical systems or surveillance systems are top-notch. They've already deployed them in a very robust way. I would imagine they're scouring everything that's left in terms of a signal. But no matter what they do, once they cross the fence line and they head in there, you're talking about a 3-level fight: up, on the ground, and down. That's subterranean complexes under those buildings. The remaining Hamas militants will be waiting, and it's going to be interesting to see how quickly they proceed and kind of what the expectations they set for how long it will take them to clear out those Hamas militants.
And then about avoiding killing innocent civilians, innocent Palestinians. I know the Biden administration, the president as well, urging the prime minister to adhere to international laws of war. We were getting some reports in from the Human Rights Watch of the use of phosphorus gas in Gaza. The IDF is denying that, though. Nonetheless, at this point, does it seem as if we are reaching a stage in which the Israelis are making the calculation, if you have not yet gotten out, you may, in fact, be killed?
I think that's what they've been trying to stress over the last 48 hours. Move, or, you're putting yourself at risk. And that's the calculation they've made. I think they think there's some urgency. I think the hostages probably put some urgency into their plans. If you were in a situation where all civilians had left and there was no hostages, they could probably, revert to more siege-type warfare. You might remember back to Mariupol with the Russians surrounding Mariupol just about a year and a half ago. They could pursue something like that, but there is a sense of urgency. There is a matter of time in terms of what they have to execute. And the longer they sit and wait, this is something where Hamas and anybody in the Gaza Strip, they know what's coming. They can see what's coming. So there's no real sense of surprise. So I'm sure for the IDF, they're really trying to take aggressive action and push forward as quickly as possible, not letting the adversary, in this case, the Hamas militants, set up their defenses in a way that are more intricate or could be more successful or deeper and harder to penetrate. I'm
going to be going to Matt Bradley in Lebanon in just a moment, Clint. But before I do, though, I want to kind of get your read on, and you talked a little bit about this, obviously, the threat from the north, that being Hezbollah. Hezbollah also primarily funded by, backed by Iran. We know that Iran's foreign minister was recently in Beirut, made an announcement early this morning, and we're going to be hearing more about that from Matt Bradley on the ground there. But how worried are you about the threat of Hezbollah from the north?
Yeah, for the most part, it's been quieter than I expected. There has been some exchange of fire. There's been some rockets going to the south. There's been airstrikes to the north and rocket strikes to the north. I think for the Israelis, they've already deployed a lot of their force. And I just have to remind people they've brought up over 300,000 reservists. This is a very small area. And when you have that number of troops, both active and add 300,000 reservists, that is a sizable military force. And Hezbollah fought a war in 2006 with Israel. They did not do well. The Israelis handled them quite quickly. I think they would have to decide how much do they want to bite off in this situation. And then that brings in the possibility of escalation from Iran. Iran is the backer of both Hamas and Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a much stronger and more advanced terrorist group in the region. Right. But still at the same point, I'm not seeing strong indications that Hezbollah is racing to join in or was even really coordinating with Hamas and seemed to have known. I would have expected that if Hamas was going to do this awful terrorist attack a week ago, you would have seen Hezbollah move in right away if they were coordinated together, if this was backed by Iran. Instead, it seemed like Hezbollah was kind of caught off guard, didn't react real strongly. And for those, rocket attacks I've come across, they've been ineffective so far. Don't seem to be coordinated. Doesn't mean they won't change their position. But at present, it doesn't seem that there's a big northern front.